just came in today, and it is in regard to the book, and it's from a single guy who's, all right, you wrote this book, Mark. Hey, I was wondering if you'd be willing to cover some more aspects of your latest book, The Myth of the Perfect One. Wait a second. Did you read it that fast? Did you read the whole thing? I know it makes sense that if we who struggle to receive God's love would truly struggle to receive love from our spouse, which that's often very, very true. I'm currently single and am seeking the Lord in regards to dating. And well, that may already show signs of the perfect one God has for me that has an impact. And I'll get to that in just a second. So the journey starts in our connection and how we connect to the Lord. With that being said, could you cover some pointers for dating and what you learned over the years, and especially what you wish was covered or established in through or by the church? Well, I think that first and foremost, the church, and I don't mean this as like an indictment, but I think the church uses so much spiritualizing when it comes to getting married that we can hyper spiritualize the decision and the choice, and we put it as in a framework of the person God has for me. And it sounds nice, but it's loaded with a lot of distortions that are actually not helpful. And I think especially for the 20-somethings in today's generation, it's inflaming a lot of perfectionistic nitpickiness, overthinking kind of stuff. And so when you read the scriptures, there's instructions about how to be married, but quite often it was her. I'd like to marry her. And it was decision being made. And then from there, you take a journey and you learn to grow in love. I think that some of what you're writing here, because I'll get into some more, but some of what you said already can already get into overthinking. Like, I got to make sure I'm ready. And you're never really ready to be married. So there's a lot of people that have I got to have this to be ready. Traditionally, a lot of people I got to get my finances ready. And so they get it ready. When I get it. You know, parents of a daughter, you want the daughter to marry a man who's got a job and can provide. So I get that. But there can be a lot of overthinking in that. There can be a sense of like, I need to be in a good place. And a lot of that can be perfectionistically influenced of like, what does that even mean? Because you're never really ready, because the work is when you enter into the marriage covenant. That's where it really happens. And Jesus's call to discipleship and call to follow him kind of followed the same pattern, didn't it? He wouldn't lay out, so when you walk with me, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you need to get ready for. Jesus was like, just drop your nets and just follow me. Let's go. There's no like pros and cons list. There's no like, just make a decision, follow me. And then in the following, you learn to grow, because now you're in a covenant relationship with him where now you are working through your issues. And so what marriage does, it puts us in a place where it's like, okay, time to work on yourself. We've fallen into the perfect person God has for me. So then if you get married and you have problems, then there's a problem with there's a problem in God's equation. Or now you're really confused, because like, what's happening here? I got problems and things I'm working through, and what's happening, God? So I think that the over preparation, the hyper spiritualizing of the person you find, because a lot of our stories have that, and you may even hear that, Melissa and I, when we talk about our relationship, because there's so much we appreciate, we're thankful to God for it. But I had to break through that thing of like, I got to get this confirmation from God, or I got to get myself prepared. I think the best advice I can give single people is be busy about helping, serving, using your time as a single person to have opportunities of ways of serving and learning and growing. Take advantage of your 20s. Don't look at 20s as prep to 30. Don't look at 20s as, or 20 as the new 30. Am I saying that right? Like all the 20s are, or 30 is the new 20s. 30 is the new 20s. Yeah. Sorry. I don't advise looking at it that way. I'll just kind of, be intentional about your 20s. Be intentional about your years, about meeting relationships and growing in relationships. And out of that, you have the best option of meeting somebody within your circle of connections. And I know people have to use online dating or whatever, and that's certainly fine. In the age that we live in, there's so many tools as far as meeting people that you could utilize. But one of my big cautions is the overthinking. That is that can sometimes be woven within, like, the red flag talk. I think you get to that in here. Well, let me just keep reading your question. Could you cover some pointers for dating, what you've learned over these years, especially what you wish was covered or established in, through, or by the church? Like maybe some areas you've discovered that will be wise to learn before the first date. No, I think that's overthinking. I think you just need to go on a first date. Like you just need to get to know somebody. You need to practice. You don't like get yourself all set. It's more like get into the relationship journey. So, and the analogy with me and Christ is the same way too. I went into the relationship. We are the bride of Christ, but we're going to get married, right? We're not married yet. We're in the engagement phase, right? We're getting ourselves ready, but in relationship, right? I'm not getting myself ready, and then I'm going to follow you, Jesus, right? There are many people that my pastoring days that were like that. I'm like, why don't you give your life to Christ? They're like, well, I got some things I got to get ready before I do that, right? And many people do that in their desire to get married. It's like the overthinking and overpreparedness of it. What would research, praying? I don't know that I would spend so much time research unless it's research of you just working on yourself, working through anxiety, working through giving and receiving love. But my biggest recommendation is take advantage of opportunities, be intentional about meeting new people, find ways to serve, find ways to get out of your head and serve others. I found that I did do that, and that was helpful to me. So that I was a very big navel gazing introspector. However, I found it very beneficial that I spend a lot of my single years giving out, pouring out, and just helping people in that kind of way. So that's stuff that I would encourage. And what would be green flags for us? I think you mean red flags, or maybe the green flag is go, right? Would be the green flag. If you're asking for a green flag, green meaning go, that's another one of those, God, give me the green light. Give me the confirmation. No, you decide who you're going to marry. And so then when tough times happen, you decide to continue to grow in marriage, right? And that is a more solid foundation to build on, because love is driven and it grows within the power of decision. If it's driven by other factors, we're going to be tossed and turned by those ups and downs emotion. I think one big point to be made is this. One is looking to the Lord for whom to make not only a connection, but also a covenant. That sounds really super spiritual. It's like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, I'm looking to you, Lord. I'm making this covenant. Now, I make a covenant before God, so it's a sacred thing. Because marriage is God's idea. God created marriage. By the way, United States government, you didn't create marriage. God did. Just saying. Side point. God made it, so therefore he designed what it looks like. And so he designed it. And so we get married. We're getting married with that divine honoring of this union that he created. But I don't find it healthy, the pattern that we cultivate of like seek the Lord's person for you, because now we're leaving somebody to this nebulous kind of compass that they attribute to this is the Lord speaking, which in my work over the decades, people's Holy Spirit, what they attribute to God told me, we have some work to do, because it could be anything. And the Lord told me, and it becomes this thing that you can't really argue with, because by goodness, God's stamp is on this. And so many of you that are familiar with my work know that I'm calling the church to go, let's loosen that up a little bit in the sense of what we attribute to what God is saying. The Lord told me this. I'm just waiting on the Lord for this person to come to me. I'm always waiting on God to bring me the right person. All of that is packaged perfectionism that gets hidden over. It sounds good. It sounds impressive. And I am watching people that have been in that, and they are in their latter years of life, and they're still waiting. And so we've done a lot of things. I'm waiting on the Lord. And I used to push back on that a lot and have some fun with it. You know, remember that old song? They that wait upon the Lord. And I would sing it as slow as I possibly could. Shall renew their strength. Get a lot of that vibrato in. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Right?
The fact that you know those words.
Say that again.
I said the fact that you have those, the words that you remember, the songs, is crazy.
Well, the songs actually help me too, because a lot of songs during those days were done to scripture, so it actually helps me remember scriptures because we remember stuff. It's hard for us to memorize things, but when there's a song or a jingle put to it, so they shall walk. I'm like, you know, I do a lot of like, what are you waiting for? Make a decision. Make a decision. So I push back with this book. I push back on putting this on God, and instead, no, this is a decision we make, and God has given us liberty. Liberty, I was talking to my kids the other day. It got a little too deep, so I had to like bring it back a little bit. But I was talking about how the word liberty is such a powerful word, and it's used both Old and New Testament. In fact, James even talks about the law of liberty, the beauty that you have to make a decision. You have the ability to choose, and there's something so, and I know it's mysterious because we're like, God's in control, but he's not controlling. God's sovereign, but he's not like driving your decisions. He told Adam, go name the animals. And Adam was like, I'm waiting on the Lord for the name that he's going to give me to name this animal. He's like, name him. Name him. And so we don't realize it's a decision we make. So then it gets down to the real issues that we're struggling with. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid to make the wrong decision. We looked at our parents' marriages and we're like, I don't want that. We see the divorce rates, which, by the way, the divorce rates are flawed. And I need to make a correction because I used it in a lot of my talks when I would talk about marriage or talk about the divorce rates. We were fed this distortion about divorce. Over half of every marriage is ending in divorce. Well, in research and looking at it, you're realizing the stats have been messed with, and the way they were accumulating that stat was actually inaccurate. And part of it was, in looking at years, they were looking at the number of marriages and the number of divorces. So if you have 1 million marriages in a year, I'm just throwing out a number, and you have 500,000 divorces that year, 50% divorce rate, right? No. It's not counting people that are already married and have been married. That's one factor. Then there's other factors in it that they didn't count for as far as coming up with that stat. So we threw that around. The statistic is actually up more. And you can do your own research if you want to. It's more in like maybe 70% of marriages actually stay intact. So anyway, that's a whole thing. There's all kinds of things that we get goofy about, but we get when you're anxious in this area, you get drawn to a lot of subjects that take you off track. So there's a lot of single people that are getting sucked into the red flags conversation, which is like, here are red flags that you need to watch out for. And the red flags are okay, right? They could be things but when you're very prone to anxious obsession and avoidance and perfectionism, you grab onto those rules, and it now feeds this avoidance and this nitpickiness and compulsivity. So, okay. So anyways, also, how do some of us grew up in crazy, not to be drawn to old, familiar crazy in others. It's impossible to do that without, Like some of your brokenness is going to come into play. Who you're attracted to and how you go about that. Yeah, you're broken. You're not going to make a perfect decision because a lot of these questions in ROCD are just laced with perfectionism. I want to avoid any possible flaw. Like, no, there's certain things you're not going to be aware of for maybe 10 years from now. Oh, I made that decision kind of based out of this, and I didn't see it at the time, right? So in our brokenness, we want to, like Melissa and I were talking, we want to self-protect. And out of the self-protection, we got to create all these rules and all these things now we're looking out for. We're checking. What are we not doing? We're not actually just growing in relationship with the other person. We're checking and looking at our lists and comparing how we feel and analyzing all of these things. So the crazy, as you say, you're born with, we want to do everything we can to avoid that from having an impact in our life. And it's unrealistic. You're going to have some of it impact your friendships, the job you pick. And this is where, like, I want to release you guys of this tormenting fear of failure that is paralyzing us from making decisions. And so I think that, the thing Elijah said in the Old Testament was like, just, you go from this opinion to this opinion, like make a decision. Joshua said, choose you this day. Now I know that's in the context of who you will serve, but I also want to encourage you to utilize it in the sense of like, decide where you're going with your journey. Decide, make a decision. Because we hyper-analyze, we hyper-overthink. When you make a decision, now you're actually learning what it means to grow in love and to let God take you on a journey of healing in that. So you wrote, one cannot have healthy friendships or relationships if they themselves aren't healthy. Okay, yes, I get that, but no one's like perfectly healthy. And you don't get healthy and then go into a relationship. This is a myth that people also believe. I need to be away by myself, work on myself. Got to work on myself. You work on mental health through practice. You work on OCD through practice in relationship. You work on ROCD actually in relationship, especially ROCD has to get through that threshold of commitment where now it's like, okay, now we're dating or whatever you kind of label you want to put on it. Remember when we were younger, it was like, go steady.
Right.
It's like, what does that even mean? We're going steady. Oh, okay. Steady. There's just like, I was always like, what does that really mean? I have that kind of brain where I just kind of like, what does that really mean when we say these words or phrases? So then when do we know we're healthy enough? Do you hear it? Do you hear it? The perfectionism? You hear it in there? When am I perfect and healthy? When am I healthy enough to be in a relationship? And so therefore, when the relationship gets rough, people go, I need some time to myself to work on myself. And I'm going to sit in a room and I'm going to zone out and think I'm going to come up with the right thing. And then I'm going to go back into. And I actually think that is something that both the world and the church believe in and utilize to a dysfunctional pattern. The world kind of is like, oh, we're going to get into the Zen place. I'm just going to be good with myself and all those things. And that can make us just a lot more self-consumed. And the church will use it in this way. I'm going to go be with Jesus. I'm going to go be with him. And I'm just going to fall in love with him. And I'm just going to be with him. And that can also lend to a lot of goofy dysfunctional patterns because life is not you and Jesus. And I know many people will push back on that. We sang a song back in the 90s, All I Need Is You. And it's not even biblically accurate because God looked at Adam, who was alone, and said, this isn't good. So if you want to get biblical, it's just a thing that we create out of our brokenness. Because a lot of it is like, you know what? The world's crazy. They're goofy out there. It's just me and you, Lord. It's just me and you. You know what? That sounds really good. All I need is, hold on a second. Let me get that. All I need is you, Lord. And we meant well. I sang it, right? You're all I want. You're all I've ever needed. We sang that in youth group over and over again, right? I get it. I did it. So anything. But then over time, you start to learn, no, in the context of human relationship is where we actually learn how to practice the invisible God who shows himself visible amongst us in our interactions. So guess what? I'm learning how to work through my mental health through how I interact with you. Yes, you. We're not supposed to point fingers, so I won't point a finger too long. But you. And so to go back to what you asked me, what would I say to the church? I don't know that I have a lot of like negative things about what the church has taught. I think the church has tried to encourage marriage, stand for marriage, encourage people to get married, and those kind of things. In my journey, I don't necessarily look back and go, oh, the church should have done this and done that. They just did. They didn't really understand some of these mental health things that go on. We weren't really honest about it, because when I began to share my obsessiveness, my fears and stuff I was working through, people just came up and would pull me aside in the hallway. Mark, I have those battles too. I have that struggle. Can you talk to my kid? Can you help this person? My husband, my wife, And it's more of that I think we've suppressed the subject of mental health, pushed it aside. Counselors will deal with it. And meanwhile, there's just so much agony and heartache going on amongst people that are struggling, that are really, really struggling. So you said about being healthy enough. And so what are things that we should be attracted to? And that's a whole subject in itself, of learning how to navigate your sense of attraction, learning to navigate your sense of sex drive. I think those factors are helpful. I don't know that I'm looking at the church to go, church, you need to do this. I think that should be built in the family. I'm not saying the church shouldn't talk about it. I'm fine talking about it. I think we should talk about it. But I also don't look at the church like some people look at the government, like we need the government to do these things. I look at a lot of things that need to be done in the home, in the family, that should be cultivated there. And I think in our homes, we need to talk about what it means to deal with attraction. What does that look like? Because attraction can go into a lot of places, and we live in a world that's like, just love is love, go with wherever attraction takes you, and who am I to judge? Like, okay, no, God has guidelines on where that should be channeled. Now, however, within that, as you're attracted to the opposite sex, and God's design for marriage is a man born as a man to a woman born as a woman. That's God's design, right? Within that context of attraction, right? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with your sex drive? How do you navigate self-control? How do you allow yourself to be filled with love and grow in love and practice love so it fills those places in your heart? Problem is that we grew up with such dysfunction. We grew up with lack of equipping and unconditional love. Fathers love to fill our hearts. We struggle with God. We struggle with nurture. So now this looking for somebody to be with is this magnified thing. So I don't know about you, but this is sometimes how I think of it. So many of us are like a like a pop love song. Do you listen to the lyrics in pop love songs? It's like this intense, this high, this you're everything I need, you're all I ever wanted, and you're satisfied. So now we're looking for that in that kind of way. Meanwhile, we have a history of emptiness and woundedness and brokenness that we're needing to practice one with another. But we're going to God, give me that perfect person that will solve all this ache in my heart. So there's a statement that I say when it comes to like marriage talks, where I will say, and I say the statement, just throw it out there to kind of get people thinking. Melissa doesn't make me happy. Now you could take that. Oh, she doesn't make you happy. What's she doing? No, that's not what I'm talking about. She is not in charge of my happiness. Happiness is an inside job. I've got to learn to do that. But I got to learn to practice that in the context of marriage. And I'm not the one that makes her happy. She has to have that journey that she has, and we together both working on ourselves are. So that is more where I encourage. It's like in the context of relationship, you're working on yourself, the other person's working on yourself, and it's actively practicing. Otherwise, this like working on love is just theoretical. And I could preach on love when I was single. I could talk about marriage all the time and things out of the Bible. It sounded great. Till I get in it, then it gets real. Then the work is real. So if you're trying to avoid as much as possible the crazy you grew up with, you'll throw yourself into another ditch. Just be sober. Hey, I come from brokenness, and I'm working on it, and I'm aware, and I'm teachable. That I think is an important aspect to recognize. Also, what are things that we should be attracted to? I'm sorry if I've rambled or repeated or rephrased questions, but I'm seeking wisdom, clarity, and discernment. Thank you for all you do and for your input, as many of us treasure you and your family and ministry so much. I thank you for that. And one of the reasons I wanted to just kind of walk through this is, yes, the book's out, and I want to encourage the book tonight and encourage you to get it, and get it for people that you find it would be helpful for. But I also see the cry in our younger generation that need voices of mentoring, that need voices of like stabilizing this stuff, because we have been taught patterns that are not exactly healthy. There's a common thing in divorce where when they file the papers, they'll check off, what is it? Incompat. What's the thing they file in divorce? What's the term? Irreconcilable differences, right? And there's like incompat. People are like, we just weren't compatible, right?
Or a conscious uncoupling.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. What do they say now in Hollywood? They do a conscious uncoupling or something.
That's a whole different thing.
They're so ridiculous.
Yes. It's but the compatibility, right? And so you could take 2 tests and compatible. And I'm not against that. I think it's helpful to learn, but it's also not a chart to go, oh, this thing matches on paper, so therefore everything should just work out. And now we're using like some external thing to tell us this is going to be okay. I think a lot of us are afraid of the future. We're afraid of things going wrong. We're afraid of fallout. We're afraid of something bad happening. So we do a lot of projecting into the future, and we're listening to the substance of things not hoped for. And I think my nightmare was I don't want to be in a miserable marriage, or I don't want to be in what I saw. I don't want to make the wrong decision. And I had to walk through that fear of recognizing it's not about getting everything feeling just right. I had to face that fear. The cool thing, though, is when you face that fear over and over and over again, you start to see how small it is, and how, in the perspective of life and journey, that what it was saying and screaming was actually not a megaphone. It was a lot like the Wizard of Oz, where you look over and there's a guy behind a curtain, and he's this little guy, and he's not that frightening at all. But it takes time, and it takes practice, and a lot of it is recognizing. And I'll say this, and then we'll take a break for some questions. There's a lot of distortions, so you're going to have to understand which way am I pointing? Oh, this way. That all these 7 distortions are influencing. And imagine all these influencing who you decide to marry. And they're all clocking at the same time. It's going to make someone highly anxious, highly doubting, feeding doubt, and delaying any decision of moving forward. And so this keeps us in a procrastination kind of state where we delay. And so we live in a world of very non-committal statuses. One of the first phases that people went to non-committal culturally was they just started living together. And that became a cultural thing. And when you watch movies and TV shows, it's just an assumed thing that they just live together, right? Just this kind of thing that just started happening. And they say, oh, it's just a paper to sign. So, marriage is just a paper. So we're just going to, it was a form of like, I'm not going to make that official commitment. And now we're seeing just so much anxiousness and doubts, and we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect our brokenness by making the perfect decision. So this is a good book for those of you that are recognizing this pattern in your life and in your journey. And if you relate at all to anything I've shared in what I've been through, then I encourage you, get a copy of it.